Hello, colleagues. I want to present my response to Dr. Naselli's balanced grading proposal. So it's a little on the extensive side. I'm going to try to keep this video as short as possible. But I had an intriguing conversation with my national board mentor, who for the last 10 years has been implementing a policy whereby she does not give students any grade, positive or negative, for missing work, and their semester grades are entirely based on the work that they submitted and that she graded. And so I'm not going in as radical direction as that, but I feel like that sort of policy addresses a lot of the educational ambitions I have and what I feel are our students' needs right now. So I'm going to propose a way that maybe we could implement that here. So first of all, I looked, in addition to talking to my mentor and some other national board mentors and teachers who also do this, I looked at the balanced grading proposal. I talked to a teacher at Juarez High School and have some information about what they do, and Taft High School. So first of all, the balanced grading proposal, which you may remember just as a refresher that Dr. Naselli presented, suggested a 50 to 100 grading structure for students, for work that students turned in, and didn't really talk about missing work. Juarez High School has an interesting policy. A student may miss up to 50% of work in a category. So each department has 4 broad categories of grade, typically with, this has a lot of typos in it, I'm really sorry, typically with like 3 to 5 specific descriptors in each category. So when student work doesn't get turned in, it gets marked as missing, but missing assignments are not calculated into the grade. It's important to realize that Juarez doesn't use Aspen. They use something called Jumpstart, and it does some things that Aspen doesn't do. But we're not going to exactly copy this anyways if we adopt this proposal. Moving right along, if a student is missing more than half the assignments for a descriptor, then that grade becomes a 0. So Jumpstart automatically flips that grade from no effect to a 0. Teachers assess each descriptor 4 to 6 times per year. So according to my source at Juarez, it's not that common for students to miss more than 50% of the assignments for a descriptor. Then Jumpstart does some things where it privileges the best work that students do to skew their grade upward, and assignments at the end of the year weigh more heavily than those at the beginning. My concern about this is the 50% calculation seems arbitrary. It really doesn't deal with late work, which is, I think, a big part of the problem that I'm feeling, is trivializing what we do and what our students do. Taft High School has a no zeros policy. So they do grade missing assignments, but they enter them as 50%. And then, because that doesn't tell a student, did you do really badly or did you miss the assignment, they copy and paste comments from a prefab comments sheet into Aspen in the notes section to let the student know, is this 50 because you're missing something? Is it because you did this or did that, whatever. Again, this is not very specific in guiding students to what work is worth what, and also not really specific in helping students to focus on specific skills. It just kind of seems to me to get bogged down in missing assignments. So here's what I'm suggesting. And again, this is for feedback purposes. I'm determined to do something like this, but I'm suggesting that other people may want to adopt it. And I haven't had a full conversation with Dr. Naselli about this, and I don't know how much of this she was able to take a look at. I just ran it by her this weekend to make sure I could present it to the whole staff without causing too many problems, which I often do. So one, the students, you could say students are still adjusting. I certainly feel they are. If student failed or did badly in Q1 and they do better in Q2, whatever their Q2 grade is, I'm going to put that in as their semester 1 grade, even if they failed. 2, missing work is not going to affect, if I end up implementing this, missing work will not affect student grades. So something like the Juarez and Taft policies, and certainly like my national board mentor, I've cut the wording of some of these things because I'm writing a letter to students, drafting a letter to students in case I end up doing this. And so some of that is copied and pasted from there. So eliminating grades for missing work. If you miss an assignment, it will go into Aspen with an incomplete code. So we can create codes in Aspen, and it will show up as INC or whatever, but it will not affect the student's grade. So that should be pretty clear. Late work, so to go along with that, I'm just not going to enter late work into Aspen, period. That only applies, that doesn't apply to major summative tests, projects, and essays at the end of units, which is, for me, is about every 3 weeks. So to be clear about this, I will accept late work. Obviously, it'll show up in Google Classroom, but I will not enter it into Aspen. So I'm not accepting it in the sense of I'm not giving a grade for it any more than I'm giving a grade for missing it. That incomplete in Aspen is going to stay there. And there's nothing a student can do about it if they've been late. However, it won't count against their grade, so they should be happy about that. So the thing is, of course, ideally I'm not giving people busy work, but I'm assigning them formative assessments and other assignments that are preparing them for the really important skills that I'm teaching them, ideally. And so that work is preparing them to succeed on the summatives. So they have to do it in order to be successful. It's just that once they're late, they won't get a grade for it. And I think that the thing is, like, to me, and I think we all have talked about this and agree with it, probably you agree with me, that in general, there's no value, little or no value to students who do late work. That's not always true, but overwhelmingly, it's not a positive thing. So another way of making up for, or a way of making up for the fact that students do need to do some kind of formative assessments is regular individual conferences, especially for students who are missing work. So in those conferences, for some of those students, that will be the formative, and I will administer an on-the-spot assessment. I plan to enter these conferences into the gradebook. And I don't know what I'm going to do about students who miss the conference, because that's definitely going to happen a fair amount of the time. I'm guessing that the student who misses the conference, whatever, 2 appointments or whatever it is that happens, will get a 0. I don't know for sure, but it's not going to be a major part of their grade. I haven't figured this one out. There's 2 things here I haven't really figured out. So I'm going to check their learning on the spot. I will have these conferences regularly, ideally every 2 to 3 weeks. And those conferences will serve as sort of formative checks for students who are falling behind on the work that is being assigned in class and out of class. So students who do not pass the class will receive an I, an incomplete. Now, again, this is something that needs to be worked out on a sort of administrative level, but I'm not going to deal with that right here. Incomplete grades do not harm, like they did in the spring, will not harm the student's GPA, but they will have to retake the class in evening or summer school. They will not receive credit for it. So to reiterate about the summative assessments, so students cannot miss a summative. So in other words, since their students are graded on how they did on the major assessments of the year, the summatives, I plan to give them all a grade. So if a student does not submit a summative, I think that my current plan is to give them, I need to really have some help thinking this through, but my current plan is that the student simply receives a 0. So the odds are if a student is missing summatives, they will need to retake the class because they didn't do all the major parts of the class. So in other words, to sum this all up, students will be graded based solely on the work they turn in on time and on summative assessments, and maybe also on conferences. So for students who are thinking, how do I game this system? Here are the 3 thoughts I've come up with. One is, there's an advantage to turning in work regularly and earning participation grades because those tend to be high grades and they raise your grade. Even though missing them doesn't harm you, succeeding at them benefits you, especially if we adopt a sort of high-end grading scale like balanced grading. And also, completing these assignments on time allows students to get the most out of class, to learn the skills that are being taught, and to know how they are doing before it is too late. Also, students who regularly miss class or fail to turn in assignments probably not be able to succeed on summative assessments, if that's the way it should work, if they're really learning something or if I'm really teaching something. So hopefully it works that way. And students who regularly miss class or fail to turn in assignments will receive phone calls home, of course, and they may be subject to other interventions by us or by the school district related to truancy or whatever it is that the issue is. It's supportive or legal or, not support, well, you know what I mean, interventions. That's all. I'm going to shut this down before it takes too much more time.